Well, thank you, Deputy Minister, so much for agreeing to this interview. We know that you're very passionate about ICT and you're always willing to open our conferences. So welcome to the 2017 ICT in the Classroom Conference. And we'd just like to ask you a few questions about what the DBE is doing to consolidate all the different ICT initiatives in the country. Could you give us an idea?
No, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation in the first place, and the enormous contribution by SchoolNet in the ICT domain. We are in the 21st century, time of the fourth industrial revolution, and ICT is becoming more and more critical and central to the facilitation of teaching and learning. Well, some 2 years ago, the President had decided to have an Operation Kisa launch. That dealt with the various facets of ICT, starting with connectivity, which is quite critical and central, that schools must be connected for administration and for purposes of teaching and learning. Then, in terms we had discussions, a dedicated stream in terms of devices that have to be used, and again, you can't use one. That depends on the environment, what is available over there, and you've got to be more flexible in terms of it, and I'm glad that your program would be speaking to that element. The third element was in relation to the curriculum and digitization. We've made huge strides in that particular area. The department has mathematics and science textbooks for grades 10, 11, and 12, math, science, and technology for grades 4, 5, and 6, and about 134 editions for the senior high school that have been digitized, most of which is interactive. We've moved away from the textbook notion to the textbook cum workbook notion.
Right.
So that we make them interactive, we allow for autonomous teaching and learning. Learners can become, can be self-regulated learning can take place, and indeed collaborative learning. So that's another domain. But obviously, if you have ICT without teacher empowerment or teachability, then you're going to have a serious challenge. And therefore, we've emphasized on that element in a fourth stream was in relation to that particular element. What do we do to ensure that we enhance the skills and competencies of educators in the ICT domain so that they can integrate ICT into the teaching and learning process? A lot of attention was given to that particular area, and already we've established 143 teacher resource centers, each of which has highly sophisticated ICT, and it's quite central to the professional development of educators that they are able to utilize ICT just beyond the level of proficiency of computers to the level of being innovative and to integrate into the curriculum. Then the last element, which is a very important element, is the element of administration. So at the level of connectivity for teaching and learning, quite interestingly, we are 54% countrywide on average. The front runners are obviously Gauteng and the Western Cape, given the historical advances in terms of infrastructure in the earlier years, and there is this disproportionality in provinces in terms of economy, etc. But there are encouraging signs in other provinces, such as the Free State, the Northwest, as well as the Northern Cape. Gauteng is really the front runner. I think they've been more bold, more robust. The Western Cape is not far behind. They're doing extremely well too. And for administrative purposes, I think we can celebrate the fact that we have more than between 93 and 95% of our learners' data that is verified through the Department of Home Affairs, captured on our LURIT system. Yes. Very soon, we hope to become web-based. We would be able to track the curriculum coverage, the attendance of learners, the attendance of teachers, the impact of their absence in schools, the achievement of learners. So what we're doing is utilizing ICT in a very holistic and comprehensive way, for purposes of administration, for purposes of professional development, for purposes of teaching and learning. And I think those are things that we haven't created, but you've spoken to us about in the past. What it says to us, and what this interview should say us, that we are good listeners. That we don't have all the solutions, but we listen attentively to those stakeholders who are in the field, and we've really experimented and certainly have shown the positive impact of ICT.
Fantastic. So you mentioned Operation Pagisa, and we know those provinces that are doing quite well. Does the department have a plan of how they'll help those provinces that haven't really done anything yet?
No, absolutely. What we do is basically, although we have 9 provinces, we've developed resources and amenities and and systems to help not a particular province but the country as a whole.
Okay.
So your digitized textbooks are made available to all provinces and are being used by all provinces. Our workbooks have been digitized. You're aware of the workbooks.
Yeah, yeah.
They are used by all provinces. Western Cape, Gauteng. In fact, the Western Cape is the best in terms of monitoring the use of the workbooks and determining its impact. So all the provinces have embraced what we've developed and designed. And the reason for it is we do so in a very pragmatic way. We get the practitioners, the experts involved in it. So it's not only academics who sit away far removed from the classroom who develop and design these books. And we get the publishers as well because they have the expertise as well. And I think quality becomes very critical and we've maintained the standards. So what we've done, what we are doing now basically with our service providers, we say to them, look, don't pay too much attention to Gauteng and the Western Cape. These two provinces have the economy, they have the infrastructure. Let's look at the Eastern Cape, let's look at Limpopo and those provinces that are struggling for purposes of connectivity. So whether it's in terms of infrastructure, ICT connectivity, provision of libraries, etc., the poorer, the umbrella provinces have the benefit. But what is quite interesting, and I think you'd like this, the province that has broken the glass ceiling of 90% in terms of matric pass rates is not the Western Cape, it's not Gauteng, but it's been Free State.
Free State. And they had the summit last week for technology.
And we were together. We were together in the Free State some years ago, where we have evidence, empirical evidence, that ICT has contributed directly to enhanced performance in that particular province.
Yeah, that's very gratifying. Yes, we're very interested in the professional development framework for digital learning that the Department of Education is just busy disseminating now around the country, and we are interested really in that process and how everybody will get to learn about it. But teachers aren't really sitting in their schools waiting for a new education policy. So how do you think that will improve their lives, particularly those teachers that don't have much access to technology yet?
Well, the first is basically to ensure that you bring ICT to learners and to educators. Right. It means that connectivity must be made available, the devices must be made available, so that they have the device to use. Can't be going to another place in order to basically develop those skills. It must be with them, they must carry it with them. So it must be part of their makeup, it must be part of the school bag, whether it's a teacher's school bag or a learner's school bag. The second is once they've got the basic proficiency, which is necessary. I mean, you've got to know how to navigate, how to surf, how to put on what the computer can do. Then you basically develop competencies. The reason why we're trying to norm this, there's so many interventions. Everybody has some idea about ICT and how it's going to be used. What we're saying is what are the minimum standards that are required, competencies that are required of an educator who wishes to teach in the classroom.
Right.
And we do this in consultation with those stakeholders, such as yourselves, who work in the area, and say that these are the definitive elements with regard to ICT pedagogy.
Right.
Whether it's in the primary school, in the high school, in the primary school, at least these are the minimum norms and standards. That serves as a framework, as a guide. It's not something that we want to impose in terms of legislation, but really to tell them, look, this is it. What then happens is you have a uniform system, and the value of that is when migration takes place amongst teachers, amongst learners, and this huge migration from rural to urban, from province to province. You don't have disparity in terms of norms and standards. You have almost a kind of uniform basis in terms of an approach to education, to learning and teaching.
Okay, that would be really nice. My last question then is going to be about SACE. At SchoolNet we run a lot of professional development courses, and we have all our courses accredited, and we collect all the data and we submit it to SACE, and teachers are very interested in how they can get SACE points. But I wonder if you could just explain how that whole process works.
Well, I'm not a representative of SACE. It's quite independent. But what we have done, and certainly we persuaded them, and we push very hard to ensure that professional development takes place, because we have a fundamental commitment to lifelong learning.
Yeah.
And given the dynamics of a rapidly changing environment, it becomes more critical that there is continuing professional development. And indeed, you play an important role in terms of providing opportunities for educators in the ICT domain in that dimension. We will encourage and we will push in that area. So you just asked me earlier about the norms and standards. That would basically help us in determining and defining which are the courses that are aligned to the curriculum, which would have a particular specific value for an educator. So that would help. We've made sure, and it's also amongst the advisors that have told us that in terms of inset training, ICT must be an important component. The conversation has already taken place. It's accomplished for inset training. Now, as teachers who are beginning the studies will utilize ICT, would basically have the proficiency that is required for them to integrate ICT into the system. It is basically the continuing part. What about the many thousands who have not had the benefit at the time that they were trained? And this is where continuing professional development becomes critical. Now, we as the department don't have the human resource capacity. We would have to rely on our partners and stakeholders. It's yourselves, it's Intel, it's Microsoft, and a range of other stakeholders to be able to provide that service. And we've never pointed the finger at a particular corporate entity to say that is our preferred choice.
No.
We don't do that.
No.
I think you would have to market, brand yourself in a particular way, but at the end of the day, I think if you provide quality service, it attracts the people that you would want to do, and that's the approach that we would have. So we would support it. We would ensure that there's a greater variety available, but that it comports or conforms to the kind of norms and standards that we collectively agree upon. And that's not determined in the boardroom or in a quiet corner. It's really as a result of interactive discussions and advice and counsel that we receive from stakeholders who work in the field.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you.
Deputy Minister.
Was it a difficult
That was super. Thank you.